Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome and thanks all of you for participating in today's webinar with the topic of EVFTA Key Points and Next Steps being organized by Deloitte Vietnam. I'm Tuan Bui, tax partner who is in charge of custom and global trade services of Deloitte Vietnam. As we all know, the EVFTA has been ratified by both the National Assembly of Vietnam and the European Union. The EVFTA has been confirmed to officially take effect from 1st August 2020. The successful negotiation of EVFTA marks Vietnam's determination in the process of deepening the worldwide economic integration and opening up numerous opportunities for Vietnamese enterprise to develop their business activities abroad, especially EU market. In this webinar, Deloitte Vietnam is pleased to share our insight and experience to strengthen your knowledge of the EVFTA to somehow support your business development in the EU marketplace. In the section, we'll summarize the main contents of the EVFTA and also give some recommendation for businesses whose activities may be affected by this agreement. Our speaker today is Bob Fletcher, Director of Deloitte Global Trade Advisory Services. Bob has over 30 years of experience working in the field of custom and global trade advisory. He is also the head of Custom Working Group of Eurocham and a member of American Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam. Bob will bring you the insights of the agreement and answer some of your questions if the time allows. During the webinar, if you have any question, please chat with us or use the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. In order to ensure the best performance of the seminar, we will turn off the use of audio and video for everyone. And here, welcome Bob to start the presentation.
Hi, Tuan. Thanks for the introduction. Let me start by saying the European-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement is a new generation of free trade agreements, a comprehensive agreement with a wide range of trade liberalization commitments by the EU and Vietnam. The agreement consists of 17 chapters, 2 protocols, and a number of memorandum of understanding covering a wide range of topics, including national treatment and market access for goods, customs trade facilitation, technical barriers to trade, dispute settlements, and cooperation and capacity building. But in the time we have for this webinar, I'm going to concentrate on just a few of those topics: the implementation status of the EVFTA, the tariff reduction schedules, the projected trade impact that the EVFTA will have on bilateral trade, rules of origin, non-tariff barriers, and then conclude with some recommendations on next steps that exporters from Vietnam or importers from the EU should consider. Next slide. So as Tuan said in his introduction, the EVFTA will go live on the 1st of August 2020. So that's just in just less than 2 days' time. So if we look at how the parties have actually proceeded in terms of implementation, Vietnam MIT has already issued guidance circular on the application of the rules of origin under the EVFTA. They've appointed the import and export departments of the Ministry of Industry and Trade to be the issuing authority for the COO form EUR1 in Vietnam. And the decree on Vietnam's import and export tariff schedules to implement the EVFTA for 2020 to 2022 is expected to be issued, may not be by the 1st of August, but certainly shortly after the 1st of August. If we compare that with the EU Commission readiness, we understand they've already finalised the import tariff schedule and that it is expected to be live and available on their systems on the 1st of August 2020. They've recently published the implementing regulation on the tariff quotas available under the EVFTA, which will take effect from the 1st of August 2020. And they've already established procedures to enable EU exporters to self-certify EU origin statements on commercial documentation under what is called the REC system. And I'll come back to that a bit later on in the presentation. Next slide. So firstly, at sort of headline level, the EVFTA tariff reduction schedule covers all chapters of the customs tariff, both in Vietnam and the EU. If we look to Vietnam's commitment, Vietnam has committed to eliminate around 98.3% of tariff lines to zero rate within 10 years, and has made further commitment that for the remaining tariff lines, they will be reduced to zero over a longer period of between 11 to 16 years, or through the application of tariff quota, which basically means a certain quantity will be able to come in free of duty, but be limited in some way. If we compare that to the EU, then the EU has already committed to eliminate the customs duties on 99.2% of tariff lines within 7 years. And they have also committed for the remaining items, they will eliminate the customs duties through the issuance of tariff quotas. So again, big commitments by both parties of the EVFTA to achieve the ultimate objective of zeroing tariffs between the two blocks by the end of the 16-year period. So I think very positive news for all importers and exporters. Next slide. If we look in a little bit more detail on the timetables for reduction, so let's first of all look at Vietnam's timetable. So as I'm sure many people are aware, with effect from 1st of August 2020, again, just 2 days' time, the Vietnam tariff will reduce to zero on EU originating product in a wide range of categories of imported goods. So as it shows on the slide, this will cover machinery and equipment, medicine, chemicals, dairy products, textiles, printed books, and a whole range of other types of products. What I want to do is just draw your attention, though, to the percentages which are shown against the different lines. So if we just look at machinery and equipment, it's showing there that 61% will go to zero. And that means that the balance of the products in that sector will reduce over a longer period of time. Some over 4 years, some over 6 years, some over 8 years, right through to 16 years. So it's very important that when looking at the impact of the FTA, that you make sure that you identify accurately the HS code of your product, so that you can make sure that you take the earliest advantage of the available zero rate. So that's a very important aspect to address. Next slide. If we look at the EU timetable for import duty reduction, then again, a wide range of products which will go to zero tariff on day one of implementation. Live animals, fish and fish products, dairy product, fruit and vegetable, rice with some limitation, coffee, textiles, footwear, wood, electronic products. So a broader category of products is entitled to zero rate with effect from the 1st of August 2020. But again, notice that there are percentages shown against some of those product lines. Again, that's because not every product under, so for example, fish and fishery product will go to zero on day one. Some of those products will go to zero after 4 years, others after 6 years, and some ultimately after 8 years. So again, earlier comment, important to make sure that you identify the correct HS code for the product so you can identify when the benefits will be enjoyed. So just to give you a couple of examples on what the reductions will be. So on the footwear sector, on import into the EU, mainly covering sports footwear. So sports footwear, general heading of sports footwear will go to zero on day one. But if we look at the 4th year, footwear is mentioned again, and that will include some boots, some I think ski boots, and some other leather shoes. So the benefits will be a little bit further down the line. Again, that applies to all the sectors. Similarly for textiles, wood articles, etc. So again, to repeat the point, important to make sure you get the right tariff classification so you can accurately identify when the zero tariff will be attained. So that's important. Next slide. Tuan, back to you.
Thanks, Bob, for the very quick introduction. And I think that, joining the incentive and the advantages of the EVFTA is, a long time to go. So probably it's time, to quickly address the comments and, the first thought from the audience of, how they will see the impact with the EVFTA on your business. So for the audience, on your screen, you see the polling questions that have having 4 options to address, your first thought of the impact of the EVFTA on your business. So please select one and then vote it, and we will see how the result will come. Okay, I hope every audience have finished their voting. So please show up the result. Okay, so my primary, comments on this is, as I said, with the information, very early information that Bob has presented, probably, some of the businesses may have, the range of product that may be enjoying the 0% tariff on the 1st of August 2020, and then they think that it would have significant impact. But for some other, they may think that some positive impact, probably their business. I mean, they may plan to have the business with in EU market, but probably some of them also participating in the supply chains of the exporter who will be exporting the final product, enjoying the zero tariff. So, Bob, back to you. Can you also give some comments on the results of the polling question?
Sure. I think the response is generally aligned with the feedback that we've had from companies that we've spoken to. I think there are some companies in sectors which certainly see, there is significant opportunity for them to expand their market into the EU. I think others may be in sectors which are perhaps not yet attractive because I think they recognise that they may well be competing with companies that already produce similar products within the EU, but nevertheless, I think it certainly is very positive that from the feedback there, over 90%, 95% of people see that there is a positive benefit of to some degree, and I think that I say confirms and aligns with the feedback we've had from many companies. Okay. So on that tone, let's move on to what is the assessment, certainly by Vietnam, of the impact of the EVFTA. So what this chart is just illustrating is what we see is sort of the current status with regard to Vietnam's exports to the EU and Vietnam's imports from the EU. So if we just look at where we are in 2019, and so before the implementation in 2 days' time, it's anticipated that within 2020, once it goes live, that the volume of trade of Vietnam exports to the EU will increase to just under $50 billion. So that's a 20% increase of where we are as at the end of 2019. And similarly for Vietnam imports from the EU, using 2019 as our base number, there's an expectation that imports will increase to around about $17 billion US. That's a 14% increase upon where we are at the moment. And then if we look further down the line to 2025, again, based against the 2019 data, we're looking at potential trade of around just under $60 billion US for Vietnam exports to the EU. That's a 43% increase over the base of 2019. And similarly, for the US imports from the EU, again, we're seeing it increasing to just under $20 billion. That's about a 33% increase from base data. And then looking forward, 10 years' time, again, flattening out a little bit, not much improvement on the 60 billion or close to $60 billion. And again, a little bit more increase on imports from the EU. But I think all the indications are, whether these are conservative or aggressive numbers, is there is definitely growth in the volume of trade. And I think that's the positive thing that is coming from the EVFTA. This is definitely going to stimulate trade between the EU and Vietnam in both directions, and that's excellent news for business. Next slide. So the next slide is just, I just wanted to break down the detail a little bit with regard to Vietnam's market share in the EU. And so again, we've used a reference point of what we understand is the market share of a range of products, not all products, but a range of products, as we were at the end of 2019. So I picked on 5 here. So if we look at the textiles, so basically textile market currently, Vietnam's contribution to the EU market share is round about 2.2%. Not a big contribution, but nevertheless, significant. But by 2025, it's anticipated that the market share will increase to 3.6%. So that's a 67% increase on where we are at the end of 2019. So again, very positive increase in the opportunity to sell more textile products into the EU marketplace. If we look at footwear, again, one of the strongest products manufactured here in Vietnam, then currently footwear represents about just under 12% of EU market share. But by 2025, it's estimated that's going to jump to 15%. That's, again, a 30% increase on current share. So again, very positive for companies in the footwear sector, and also companies that are involved in the sort of the periphery of components and parts for the footwear sector. So I think those are very strong sectors for Vietnam, traditionally being strong sectors, and I think they're seen as being opportunities for significant growth going forward in the next few years. But if we look at some of the other areas, which again is where Vietnam has significant export market, cereals, fruits and vegetables, aquaculture products, machinery and appliances, not recognised as being much growth in the next 5 years. And there's a number of reasons for that. Partly because certain fruits and vegetables and cereals are already grown in the EU market by EU countries. So it's going to be a little bit harder perhaps for Vietnam to break into those markets in the shorter term. Similarly for aquaculture products, again, produced in the EU. And also there are some, I think, concerns around whether Vietnam product is what the EU market wants. Again, I think there's work to be done to see whether the demand can be generated for the aquaculture product. And then lastly, machinery and appliances, again, pretty flat in terms of where we are now and where they think they'll be in 2025. Again, partly because machinery and appliances are already produced in the EU, and maybe perhaps to a higher level of quality and sophistication than those produced in Vietnam. But nevertheless, I think that the market will grow, but not nearly significantly over the next 5 years. But in all cases, I think there's positive news and opportunity for Vietnam exporters, say, to grab more market share of the EU market. So I think that's very positive news. Next slide. So now I think we're getting into a little bit more of the detail, and this is about where we've identified that there are opportunities to take advantage of zero tariffs, either commencing on 1st of August or later in the tariff reduction schedule. But the key thing is, what do we need to do to take advantage of those reductions? So to do that, then the product that is being exported, either from the EU or from Vietnam, has to meet prescribed rules of origin. And those rules of origin are set against specific tariff HS codes of the product that's being exported. So coming back to my earlier point, important to make sure you identify the correct HS code for the product, because that will then determine what is the rule that will need to be applied. So basically there are two fundamental sets of rules. The first one is what is called wholly obtained. This is probably the easier of the rules to satisfy, and that covers products, agricultural products which are grown and harvested in one of the parties being EU or Vietnam, mineral products and metals, etc., which are extracted from the soil or seabed of the parties, live animals born and raised, and products of sea fishing by vessels which are registered in the EU or are registered in Vietnam. So those are generally applied, say, to fruit, vegetables, and products which are produced, from within resources of the countries of EU or Vietnam. So typically that is an easier test to satisfy. The other rule is the one that applies to most manufactured products, and that is where the goods are not wholly obtained from materials or components totally from the EU or totally from Vietnam. So in that situation, what we have to satisfy the certifying authority in order for origin status to be given is that the non-originating material, so those are materials which are not of EU origin and are not of Vietnam origin, that those non-originating materials have undergone a sufficient working or process or operation to transform them into an originating product. So the focus here is identifying the non-originating material. And I think through our experience, most manufacturing companies source their parts and components from a wide range of source countries. And therefore they need to identify the sources of those and then make sure that those non-originating materials have undergone the sufficient process or transformation to convert them into originating status. So if we move to the next slide, I'll just give some examples of that, because the rules are quite specific and a little bit complex in part. So the first of these rules is that, again, depending on the HS code of the product that is being exported, there will be a designated product-specific rule assigned to that HS code. So these are just some examples of some of those specific product rules that may have to be satisfied. So we look at the first line, we're looking at the export of embroidery in the piece, in strip or in some form of a motif. There, the rule is that the manufacture that takes place in which the value of all the materials, and here we're talking about non-originating materials, that the value of all non-originating materials does not exceed 50% of the ex-works price of the product being exported. So that will require the manufacturer exporter to be able to demonstrate through the bill of material, through their purchase records, through the costings of the product, that the non-originating material has not exceeded 50%. So that's a test that is quite commonly applied. The next rule is where only certain materials can be used to make the finished product. So the example we've shown here, tubes, pipes, and hollow profiles of iron or steel, so that's the finished product. There, the rule is that those products must be manufactured either from the base material of iron or non-iron alloy, and in some cases actually have to be made from flat sheet product. So they're basically saying you take a flat sheet of steel or non-alloy steel, and you have to transform it from that state into a tube, a pipe, or a hollow. And if you do that transformation, then that will be deemed to have been made in the EU or made in Vietnam as appropriate. Some cases there is an exclusion where non-originating materials cannot be contained in the product being exported. So again, we've an example of cereal-based products. Again, some of the headings there say that the cereal products have to be manufactured, but all the materials have to be in Chapter 10, and all of those materials have to be wholly obtained. So you cannot have any non-originating material in that product. So again, quite a restricted condition. And again, you have to look in the detail of whether that would apply to the product that you're exporting. Other cases, there are some specific working or processing operations that have to be conducted. Again, we use a simple example, packing cases, boxes of wood. There, you basically, the product has to be manufactured from board, flat board, that is not already being cut to shape or to size. So you can imagine a large panel, a large board of wood, you have to take it from that state through all the steps of production to create a packing box or case, then that would be deemed to be originating in the EU or Vietnam. And the last rule I just highlighted here is that notwithstanding there may be some specific rules based on HS code, individual rules, in some parts of the tariff, the FTA requires more than one rule to be satisfied. So I've given an example here of petroleum coke, petroleum bitumen. There are a number of operations that have to be carried out. You know, it will specify, first of all, refining, and then depending on the heading, there may be some other additional operations in which all the non-originating materials must be classified to a heading that's other than that of the finished product. In that situation, you have refining, and then you also have to have other conditions where is all the base material. The tariff heading of those base materials must be different to the tariff heading of the finished product. So again, I come back to my earlier comment, it's very important to make sure you identify the right HS code for your product, because that will then drive what specific rule that you have to test. So very important step in determining the implementation and the benefits under the EVFTA. Next slide. So again, I've just highlighted before, you know, some of the basic rules, but there are some unique provisions in the EVFTA that I want to bring your attention to. And that is the EU already has signed some FTAs with a number of countries around the world. And specifically for this region, they have signed an FTA with Singapore, and they have signed an FTA with South Korea. What the EVFTA provides for is that where there is an FTA in place, in operation between countries and the EU, then they will allow the materials which are sourced from those countries to count, if they're imported into Vietnam, to count as if they are of Vietnam origin. So let me just give you some examples of that. The first one is, if we look at ASEAN, at the moment, only Singapore has finalized and implemented an FTA with the EU. The other countries in ASEAN are still in the process of negotiation, but as we stand today, only Singapore has a live FTA. And within that FTA, currently, the only products which could originate in Singapore that could be imported to Vietnam and be treated as being Vietnam content is squid and octopus product. So at this stage, not a wide range of application. But that may change in the future. So that's something that we need to look at and keep to monitor for future developments, both in terms of individual country and ASEAN membership of FTA with the EU. So important point perhaps for the future. Another one is Korea, and Korea already has a well-established FTA with the EU. And as a result of that, the EVFTA provides that fabrics, materials which are of Korean origin, so they would have met the origin rule in Korea for the EVFTA, for the FTA that they have with the EU, that materials which are going to be imported into Vietnam for the production of products classified under Chapter 61 and 62, which is sort of the textile sectors of the tariff, then some fabrics, when imported from Korea into Vietnam, can be treated as if they are of Vietnam origin. And I know this is of interest to many Korean companies that already have operations here, but are looking to see about expansion of those operations to provide materials for use in manufacture of Vietnam product for export to the EU. So again, an important development on this concept of accumulation of origin. And last but certainly not least, sorry, go back, is we have materials which are sourced from the EU. So any material which comes in material, components, parts, etc., of EU origin, which are supplied to Vietnam manufacturers with a valid proof of origin, those materials, parts, components effectively count as if they were Vietnamese origin. They count towards the Vietnam content of the finished goods. So this is also important because it now effectively gives Vietnam manufacturers access to materials, parts and components of the EU, and that may help them to qualify for EVFTA and therefore enjoy the preferential treatment on the finished product when it moves into back to the EU marketplace for ultimate sale. So again, very important steps, and this concept of accumulation of origin, I say, is a big advantage of the EVFTA. Next slide. Okay. So I think now we need to look at, as I mentioned earlier, is the proof of origin. And here we have some variation to what we typically see under free trade agreements. So let me just run through the high level of what those differences are. For export from the EU, basically there are two types of certification. So for individual consignments, where the total value of that consignment is up to 6,000 euro, roughly 6,000 US dollars, any exporter in the EU can self-certify the origin status on commercial documents. The commercial documents being invoices, packing lists, other statements of origin. They can self-certify, obviously providing they are satisfied that they have met the origin rule as set out in the EVFTA that aligns with the HS code that they believe applies to the product. So up to 6,000, anybody can self-certify. But for consignments where the total value is more than 6,000 euros, only registered exporters can self-certify the origin status. And I mentioned at the beginning, there is a scheme in the EU whereby companies which are regular exporters, and certainly who intend to export goods of a value of more than 6,000 euros per shipment, they can register on what is called the Registered Exporter Scheme, the REX scheme, register with the certifying authority in the EU. You register that you are a manufacturer or an exporter. You declare that you qualify for the origin rule. You satisfy the origin rule for the product. That will be examined by the authorities in the EU. And if they're satisfied with that, you'll be registered. You'll have a registered number, and that number will be quoted in addition to any self-certified statement of origin on the commercial documentation. So the big difference here is there is no paper certificate of origin anymore. There is no CO, as we see with many agreements. That has gone. Is self-certification on commercial documents only. That is a big change from normal FTAs. If we contrast that, though, with Vietnam, Vietnam is still sticking, for the short term at least, to paper-based control, and that is that the certifying authorities in Vietnam, which are the appointed import and export departments of the MOIT, they will be issuing certified certificate of origin form EUR1. So that is the document that will have to be obtained by Vietnam exporters, and that will need to be provided to the EU customer in order for the EU customer to take advantage of the preferential tariff rate. Vietnam government has made a commitment that at some future date they will allow self-certification for approved exporters. But as it stands today, they have not yet made a commitment about when that will come into effect. We are certainly pressing the authorities to make such a firm commitment, but as of today, nothing has been committed other than that they will look to implement that, say, at some future date. So something to look forward to, but at the moment, paper-based control on EUR1, that's very important. So going back to the application process, when you're filing your application, whether it's self-certification or whether it's paper-based control, when making the application, the exporter has to provide evidence of the working process, the manufacturing process, the origin, sourcing of the materials, and show to the authorities that you actually meet the prescribed origin rule that applies based on the HS code of the exported product. So based on that information provided, the authorities will either approve the self-certification or they will approve in Vietnam EUR1 form. So again, very important that that documentation is correct and accurate and best reflects the true status, of the production and sourcing of materials for that product. Certificates or proofs of origin, they have a lifespan of 12 months from the date of issue. Again, if it's from Vietnam, from the date that the certifying authority stamps the form to say this is a certified CO, it is 12 months from that date, not from the date of shipment. So it's important that if you're exporting to the EU, that that document is supplied to the EU customer so that they can present that to customers within that validity period. If it's outside the validity period, then likely the FTA rate will be denied, and typically MFN rate would then apply to the importation in the EU. And similarly, if it's self-certification from the EU to Vietnam, if the certificate not presented within 12 months, I suspect it will fall back to MFN rate. So again, losing an opportunity for tariff reduction. And last but not least, I just wanted to highlight there is a need for exporters to keep a copy of the origin certification as well as the supporting documents for at least 3 years. This is important for two reasons. One is that notwithstanding there is certification at the time of export and approval at the time of export, there may always be a request for verification of any origin declaration that has been made. So we use an export from Vietnam as an example. It is possible that the customs authorities in the EU may have some doubt about whether the product is actually qualifying, and they therefore may request the certifying authority in Vietnam to revisit the certificate of origin and for them to reconfirm that the product actually qualifies. So important that the exporter has got a copy of this application that was submitted and all the supporting documents so it can be re-examined if required. If it's not available, then the risk is that they will then say there's no proof of the goods qualifying and the preferential rate would be denied. So important that those records are kept. Next slide. A little bit I want to add on about the certificate of origin in Vietnam. And again, this is a departure from what we typically see for other FTAs. On the certificate of origin EUR1, there are a combination of some mandatory information and some optional information. So the mandatory information covers you must have the name of the exporter, it must show the country or territory where the goods are considered as originating, in our case Vietnam, the country or territory of the destination, item number, marks and numbers, and description of the goods. I just want to emphasize here that the description of the goods is very important because there is no longer a requirement to actually show the HS code of the product on the certificate of origin. So the assessment of qualification in Vietnam, in the EU, would whether the description of the goods on the commercial document or on the CO align with the descriptions in the tariff of the EU. So very important that the description is accurate, full and complete. Otherwise, the risk is that the preferential rate will not be granted. And other mandatory information is typically, maybe requiring to show weight or other measure, number, volume, etc. So that information, again, depends on the HS code as to what other measures or what other details have to be applied, stated on the CO UR1 form. If we look to the other side on the optional information, information of the consignee is no longer required. You can put it on there, but it's no longer a requirement. And no longer need to put detailed information about the itinerary of the shipment, the vessel number, the planned date of export, no longer a requirement. A reference number of the commercial invoice that is supporting the CO, no longer required. Again, no longer required to include HS codes of the goods or to state what is the origin criteria that was satisfied. That information is optional. If you wish to put it on the export certificate, your choice, but not mandatory. But I would just emphasize that on the application for the certificate of origin, so the application to the certifying authority in Vietnam, on the application form itself, the HS code of the goods must be shown, and the origin criteria that you, as the exporter, are saying you satisfy also has to be shown. But that is only on the application document itself. Okay, so let's now have a quick look at the non-tariff barriers. And I know this is an area that many companies have expressed sort of concern or reservation about selling product into the EU. So again, here I'm focusing on primarily Vietnam exporters to the EU. But I think in general terms, many of these controls and restrictions, etc., are generally applied in many countries around the world, including to some extent here in Vietnam. But if we look at exports to the EU, the prime objective of the non-tariff barriers is consumer protection. But it's also there to safeguard fair trading, competitiveness and free movement within the EU. So again, it's not all negative, but it just is looking to make sure the product is safe and there is sort of a level playing field in terms of product produced within the EU and product which is imported into the EU. So a very wide range of categories of products have non-tariff barriers set against them. So examples here, I'll put here toys, machinery, radio equipment, devices, electrical devices, cosmetics, chemical substances, etc. So a very wide range. And exactly what the non-tariff barrier is often depends upon the business, the market and the product, and companies may face both individual requirements and in some cases more than one requirement that actually has to be satisfied. So again, important to identify based on not only the tariff classification of the product, but also on the description of the product. Very important to understand what non-tariff barrier may apply to the product that's being exported. And some of those requirements, give an illustration, are, for example, health and safety will be, the design of the product, is flammability, its electrical properties, and whether it contains some hazardous chemicals or substances that they do want consumers to to touch or absorb. In some cases, the barriers, they need to know what are the manufacturing processes that have been performed, and particularly to make sure that in that process, sort of foreign objects or unwanted materials have not sort of got into the production process. So again, very important from the sort of the health and safety perspective. Some products, there's a lot of emphasis around the product performance, and particularly around energy efficiency. So quite common for domestic appliances and washing machines, refrigerators, microwave, etc. There is a requirement to make a clear labeling indication of what is that product's efficiency rating. And if it is not efficient, there is a risk that that product would not be allowed to be imported into the EU. And last but not least, there is a requirement in the EU that at various levels for sellers, wholesalers, importers, that if there is any defect in a product or that product has an end of life cycle, that the companies importing it, distributing it, selling it in the country have to have some sort of end of life policy where they will take that product back. And we're seeing an increase of that idea, that concept within the EU on a wide range of goods. Next slide. I just wanted to then add just a few examples of non-tariff barriers, partly within the EU and then a couple here in Vietnam. So if we look at EU requirements, I've just picked on two, textiles and footwear. So again, here we have textile and footwear mandatory product safety. They have to be, there are labeling requirements that have to be satisfied. Details of the chemicals that might be included in the production process. Certainly, materials which are made from wild animals or plants have to be clearly stated and may deny access to the EU market. And the products are subject to a conformity marking, the CE marking, which is basically a statement that these goods meet all the non-tariff barrier requirements. So that certification will typically be provided by a third-party testing house here in Vietnam or somewhere before the goods are put onto the market. Similarly, electronics and electrical engineering, again, a lot of focus on product safety. Every product has to be marked with a CE marking to confirm that. In some cases, there's an eco-design and energy labeling is required. Again, certification that the product does not contain hazardous chemicals, either that reside in the product itself or were used in production. And again, my last point about waste product, electrical products and electrical equipment, whether those have to be returned and taken back by the importer. So some very specific requirements there for those sectors. If I look at the Vietnam side, then a couple of things. We already have some controls on non-tariff measures. So Vietnam regulations on alcohol and non-alcoholic beverages, they already have a whole list of rules regarding conformity to Vietnam requirements. Products are generally always required to undergo food safety inspection. And again, certain products are required to have very specific labeling attached on the product, either at the time of arrival in Vietnam or have to be fixed before those products are sold in the Vietnam market. Some differences and some relaxations that are coming through under EVFTA. Again, at the moment, there are restrictions on who can distribute and sell alcohol in Vietnam. The longer term agreement is that Vietnam will ensure that EU companies will be able to invest and be involved directly in the distribution and sale of product in Vietnam. And also there will be easing the restrictions to allow EU FDI companies to actually manufacture beverages, alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages, immediately after the FTA comes into effect. So again, relaxations, taking away some of the barriers that currently face EU investors. So that's a positive step. And then certification on auto parts, again, already have some regulations in place. For parts and equipment, again, Vietnam has now agreed that they will accept EU certification of parts. The type approval in the EU will now be accepted without any requirement for further testing. So they will agree to that within 3 years of coming into effect. And then for whole vehicles, complete vehicles, again, Vietnam has committed that they will recognize and adhere to UN vehicle regulations and standards and not introduce any additional requirements over and above those globally accepted standards. So again, positive steps that take away some of the barriers for EU exporters to Vietnam. Tuan, back to you.
Thank you, Bob. We've gone through, the overview of the advantages and the potential challenges from the EVFTA applicable to the businesses in both countries, but focusing on those doing the manufacturing or trading of goods, exporting or importing from EU market. There could be a lot of concerns, and during last half an hour, we received some questions and from the audience, and we already answered it, and some of them are in process to be answered. And so this is the time, after going through the overview of the challenges and the advantage, we would like to hear from your thought of which area of the EVFTA implementation will present the greatest challenge to your business. And looking at the options here, you can see it could be coming from the ERH code determination, or the satisfaction of the rules of origin, or meeting the non-tariff barrier requirement, or to some cases it could be all of those challenges. So you'll be having 1 minute to complete this polling question, and we'll see how your feedback would be. So to you, Bob, based on your experience working with a lot of companies within being member of Eurocham, do you see also that they have similar concerns, like what the Vietnamese businesses may be concerning?
Yeah, I think again it varies. I think face challenges from Vietnam customs on tariff classification of products. So I think there is a concern for some companies that that there may be challenges, and I think that's fair to assume that I think we can expect some challenges going forward. Some companies, particularly those that are involved in manufacture and have multi-sourcing of parts and components, I think, yes, again, I think they're maybe not so sure, not so confident as to whether the combination of the sourcing plus the combination of the manufacturing processes are sufficient to prove that the products are qualifying. So again, I think we see that. And again, I see the poll results are up. Yeah, and I think some people, particularly those who've never had any experience of exporting to the EU market, I think some of those are concerned about whether they will be able to satisfy the non-tariff barrier requirements. I think those that are perhaps already using GSP on exports to the EU are probably already familiar with most of those. But if you're a new market entrant, then I think that is new. But a number, as the poll suggests, I think many companies are still see that all of the areas are a potential challenge to them to take advantage of this market. So I think that's a very good response from the respondents. I think that's a fair reflection of what we see from our discussions.
Yeah, looking at the results of the polling question, although we don't have 100% attendees responding to this polling question, but overall we can see that many of them may have no idea or of the potential challenges, or the how to utilize the advantage of the EVFTA. And I think it's a time for us to give them some hint on some guideline of next step, that what they need to care about, what they need to focus, and if they really want to participate in this commercial transaction between Vietnam and EU market, what they really need to to focus on the coming time. Yeah, back to you.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Tuan. So let me first of all then focus on what I see as issues that Vietnam manufacturers, exporters need to consider. I think the starting point is more of a commercial issue rather than as a pure customs and trade issue, and that is you need to identify whether there are actually customers in the EU for your products, and also what competition you may face. As I mentioned at the beginning, EU countries, some of the EU countries already produce some of the products which are typically manufactured here in Vietnam. So a starting point has got to be is, will my product compete? Will there be customers for my product in the EU? I'm sure that there will be, but I think it's important to actually understand, what is the size of the prize, what is that opportunity, and what is the potential competition I face, and therefore the margins I might be able to earn on that business. Secondly, I think importantly, if you're new to that market, what are the non-tariff barrier measures that I may be facing? And can I achieve those? And what is the cost of me achieving those? Because that may have an impact on the viability of exporting to the EU. Then I think confirm the EU duty rates that apply to your product, again based on the HS code, and identify when the benefits will come through. Some may be immediate, but as you see on others, maybe up to 10 years later before the benefit will be fully enjoyed. What are the qualifying conditions? Then looking at what is the source of my material? Can all my production activities meet the qualifying conditions? And if not, what can I do? How can I adjust my model to meet the requirements? Some cases that may not be possible, but in many cases it is possible to make small changes to actually satisfy the origin rule. Then obviously you need to generate the documentary evidence to enable the importer into the EU to get the EVFTA rate. So make sure your application to the authorities here is full and complete and accurate to get that form certified. And also lastly, as I said at the beginning, make sure that you have good customs procedures, maintain all the documentation, particularly around the origin determination, just in case your export is subject to any sort of future verification by the customs in the EU. So those are, I think, my initial recommendations for Vietnam manufacturers and exporters. Next slide. So we're looking at Vietnam distributors and importers, maybe not such a long list, but again, important to make sure that we identify the HS code and the EVFTA rates that will apply to the imported goods. Ensure that the EU suppliers provide on the commercial documents a sufficient description of the goods to make sure that it aligns with the description in the Vietnam tariff, and that it bears the appropriate statement that the goods meet the rule of origin under EVFTA. And that's very important. If it's not there, then the EVFTA rates will not be enjoyed. Do make sure that when the customs declaration is completed, that the form is completed to show that EVFTA rates are being claimed. And again, common issue, make sure that whatever is submitted to customs, that there is consistency of information between the customs declaration and the commercial documents, and particularly around the origin statement, because we know that if there are any variances, they are likely to be challenged by customs in Vietnam and therefore could jeopardize claims to EVFTA treatment. So I think those are my recommended next steps for Vietnam importers and distributors. Back to you.
Thanks, Bob, for your presentation. I think the information that that we share with the audience in this morning section is quite useful to some extent, and it provide some useful information of the overall impact and also the implementation schedule of the EVFTA, as well as some very primary area that the businesses need to to prepare and also to watch out and to consider to restructure somehow to the business process or the supply chain and things like that. So to the audience, if you have any question, you can raise it live now, and we'll try to cover some of that. During last hour, we already received some questions and we answered already. So hope everyone can see the answer and respond from Deloitte Vietnam team, and you can get benefit from that. So we have some question pop up in the chat box here. I think that for this question from Vanang, I don't know if you were the one asking the first question earlier that we already answered, but you may refer to the answer we already typed in the Q&A box. For the question from Nguyen, there was also a similar question that was asked in the Q&A box. You may refer to our answer about the transshipment transaction to a third country. For your information, after this webinar, we'll send a copy of the presentation slides to all of you, the audience, the participants in this webinar, and also the question and answers raised during the webinar, so that you can have the same information, and hopefully it will be useful for all of you. So. Deloitte Vietnam, in Deloitte Vietnam, we have the custom and global trade advisory practice for more than 10 years, and we have quite a good credit in this market. So we understand that the EVFTA will be effective in next few days, and there will be a lot of concerning from the existing businesses, both importer and exporter. So if any of you or any of your colleagues has any questions, we are pleased to support you, and if you refer to the screen, we have a various range of services to support the global trade advisory and also custom services, not only for EVFTA, but also for domestic custom services. So if you have any further questions and a more specific one, please contact with our custom and global trade advisory team in both Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City office at the contact information as shown in the screen. Okay, so it appears that you may not have any question right now. So we will keep contact with you and to respond to any of your concern regarding the EVFTA implementation, starting from next few days. So on behalf of Deloitte Vietnam, I would like to thank you all, and we really appreciate your participating in this webinar. And please spend half a minute to complete the webinar evaluation so that we can, understand and have more comments from your, from your time enjoying the webinar with us and to improve for our next webinar. The evaluation will finish in 1 minute from now. Okay, the evaluation time completed, and again, thanks all of you to participate in this webinar, and we are hoping that you you enjoy the presentation. We will send the the slides for your reading and reference, as well as the summary of all of the questions and answers that that gone through the webinar. And we are hoping that to see you in other webinar coming. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.